I'm Caroline Elkins, and I'm the founding director of Harvard's Center for African Studies. I'm here in South Africa, where the center is poised to open its first office on the African continent here in Cape Town. It will be a site of incredible innovation and collaboration with our partners from across the African continent. Back at home in Cambridge, the Center for African Studies uniquely facilitates the teaching and research of some 500 faculty members across the arts and sciences and Harvard's 9 professional schools. Together, we are dedicated to the training of a new generation of Africanists and African leaders for the 21st century. And indeed, it's under our president, Drew Gilpin Faust, that Harvard has emerged as one of the foremost centers for the study of Africa in the world.
I'm so pleased to have the Center for African Studies become a center and to fulfill all the potential that has been part of the increasing focus on Africa amongst our students and faculty in recent years. We have so many people across the university with interests in this field, and the center will bring them together in new ways and help them to learn from one another and to contribute to the work of the whole, to make the whole greater than the sum of its parts.
The Center on African Studies, I think, broadens the net to this entire university community, bringing in all of the other major colleges and faculties and their students as well, in a full outreach in terms of what it is Harvard can do and bring to an engagement with Africa.
We're very excited about the collaboration with Harvard University in both the African Leadership Network and African Leadership University program that we're launching. We believe that the next generation of African leaders will be greatly enriched by the tremendous intellectual resources that Harvard University has as we create new ideas about the future of Africa and reflect also on the history of where we've come from, to really understand the challenges that we faced and also what the opportunities exist for the future.
I initially came as every good African boy, as pre-med, I was going to be a doctor. And then I decided to do African and African American studies. And I remember when I went home and I told my uncle that I was going to study African studies, and his jaw dropped. He looked at me and said, "You left Africa to go to America, to study Africa." You know, he just couldn't comprehend why I would leave Africa to go to the US only to study Africa. In studying Africa here, it made me realize how much of Africa I didn't know.
Africa and Africans need to own how the dialogue is shaped around Africa itself. And what better place to do that than a place like Harvard? So I think this dialogue is really important. The center, the arrival of the center, I think provides a really important convening place. It has the potential to have convening power around important issues. And I think physically just establishing that presence sends a very powerful signal to the rest of the world.
Welcome to the law school commencement ceremony.
The insights, resources, traditions, cultural practices that Africa has to offer, I see already as a great opportunity for students from other parts of the world and for faculty, for research, whether it's dealing with issues like transitional justice or issues like how do you actually build a legal system that crosses from customary justice to formal justice. Again, increasingly we have students from Africa. And it is very fascinating to me to see the students from Africa very interested in building connections with students from China and vice versa, and indeed students from all over the world. And if we can host students as they develop their own professional identities in becoming leaders in their own countries and in the world, forging a network while they're here, it holds great promise, I think, for the whole world.
One of the reasons that I came to Harvard was actually to be able to run for office in Somalia. You need to be able to build that country because we have to do it from scratch. There's nothing in place. And so the network that I have, the people, the mentors that I have here will be very instrumental in doing that.
So I started coming to Rwanda in 2010. I've had incredible support from what was the Committee on African Studies, and which is fabulous, is now a center. I've had really intellectual, moral, and financial support for the past couple of years. Having an institution that's associated with really serious, ethical, morally grounded, innovative, engaged work over the long term can really make a huge difference, not only in how Harvard is seen in Africa, but how the West is seen in Africa, right? And what kinds of global collaborations exist between North and South and East and West.
The Harvard School of Public Health has been working in Africa and with African partners for at least half a century. To give you a recent example, we've started the Harvard Ministerial Leadership in Health program, where for every year now, for 3 years, we have brought for an intensive immersion experience at Harvard, ministers of health and also ministers of finance from Africa talking about health.
Your bounty threatens me, Mandela, that taut drum skin of your heart on which our millions dance.
It is our opportunity to be the premier place for the study of Africa across the nation and the world. We have an incredible group of faculty, scholars, students participating in African studies right now. The opportunities for our students to learn about Africa is beyond measure. Just one simple example, the number of African languages that we teach here on campus, 39, more than any other institution in the world.
So I think it's a boon for Harvard, for researchers, that there is this tremendous investment in understanding African languages. And it makes it easier also for African scholars and for African people to actually be part of the research process, as opposed to just being objects who are basically being researched. Now Africans themselves become part of the research process and the research effort.
The federal government's recognition of the Center for African Studies as the National Resource Center is an acknowledgement that there has been extraordinary intellectual leadership at Harvard on the study of Africa. It is an acknowledgement that the Harvard of today and the Harvard of the future with regard to Africa matter and will be shaping the future of the intellectual agenda and will be shaping the future of young lives as they think about Africa.
Africa has changed a lot in the last decade or so. There's a much bigger focus on science, technology, and economic transformation. And those fields are essentially interdisciplinary. And that's where the strength of Harvard, with its diverse schools, comes in. But only a place like the new Center for African Studies has the ability to harness that expertise and bring it to bear on specific policy programs.
As a Harvard alum, knowing that there's finally a real center for African studies at Harvard is deeply affirming and helpful in a number of ways. I think Harvard has a very important role to play in the dialogue about Africa in the 21st century. On the one hand, it can play a unique convening and guiding role for decision makers from around the world who are looking to understand the continent in a holistic way, in a way that only Harvard can, thanks to the range of its capabilities. At the same time, in Africa, Harvard's brand, reputation, and institutional strength allow it to influence the dialogue in a way that few other institutions can, and really help Africans themselves chart the direction that they wish to follow.
Freshman year, I came to Harvard and I did not have any intention of being in African studies or sort of studying Africa, but I ended up taking Professor Mugane's Intro Swahili course, and I totally fell in love with the language program. So the Center for African Studies was able to provide foreign language and area studies fellowship that enabled 8 weeks of summer study abroad, and it was amazing.
The granting of Title VI status is the equivalent of the laying on of hands. It's the profession itself, through the education department, saying these are the major centers for the study in the United States of the African continent. And for Harvard to be chosen once was astonishing. To be chosen twice is a miracle under the brilliant leadership of Caroline Elkins. Many of us tried. We had mounted 2 attempts or 3 attempts before, but only under Caroline's leadership was the university successful, and that's not an accident.
So we necessarily have to think of ourselves not just as researchers looking back or trying to look back in history or trying to understand what has happened, but to contextualize that and to understand that we actually have a responsibility to leverage that knowledge to figure out how can we be active problem solvers? How can we take this scholarship to make a difference? I believe we have a responsibility to do so because we are tasked with so much opportunity, so much resources here, that it's not enough to look in and have these discussions among ourselves. We have to leverage the technology we have today and to disseminate it and to go out and to have a positive impact and change in policy and actions, in people and in behaviors.